Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to helping you build a better workplace. Project HR is brought to you by IRI Consultants. IRI empowers leaders to prevent and solve mission-critical workforce issues through holistic and sustainable strategies. For more information, you can visit IRI at iriconsultants.com. I am Jennifer Oraquad, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for this episode of Project HR. At the start of this new year, talent acquisition continues to be one of the biggest challenges facing human resources professionals. As our world of work continues to evolve, so too does our understanding of what candidates want, need, and expect from their jobs. So joining me today to help us decipher the latest trends in talent acquisition is Tessa Misiaszek, the head of research for Korn Ferry Institute. Tessa, thank you so much for joining us today on Project HR.
Thanks so much for having me, Jennifer. It's great to be here.
So Tessa, you and your team at Korn Ferry recently released a report titled The Future of Talent Acquisition. It offers such a comprehensive view of where we are and where we can go with hiring. Tell me a little bit about how this report came about.
Yeah, so what was interesting is when we looked to 2023, and this was towards the end of last year, Korn Ferry talent acquisition experts from around the world came together with their thoughts on what the coming year will bring for the job market, for the changing market conditions, and considering, we're now officially post-pandemic. Can we say that?
I hope so.
Considering perhaps we're post-pandemic, what's going to be the impact on workforce planning strategies that firms and companies can use to attract top talent, and the fact that we have a generational shift happening in our talent workforce with Gen Z coming in, and perhaps the silent generation. I think Joe Biden is part of the silent generation, so I guess we can still say they're part of our workforce, but they're slowly moving out. So, with Gen Z coming in and millennials who will comprise of 75% of the workforce by 2025, there's a lot of changes that companies have to consider.
So what was your research process for the report?
Yeah, so our research process was really to go to our experts. As you know, Korn Ferry International is the world's largest executive search and talent management consulting firm. And so we went to our talent acquisition experts from around the world to really be able to interview and survey them regarding what they felt were and what they were hearing were the biggest trends, the kind of areas of focus that companies were most thinking about as they were looking towards 2023.
So I think what impressed me the most and what we're seeing in so many other areas of business right now is this report, it's not just a trend piece, it's a comprehensive step back, assessing why we work the way we work and embracing the disruption. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would, because it does take into consideration not just from the perspective of search and talent acquisition, but also how do you retain your talent? How do you develop your talent? And who else does the search function that attracts top talent? Who else do they have to work with? And what does the company need to consider to actually keep their talent within the organization? We just went through, it's interesting just to see what's happened over the past year, from going from a labor shortage to seeing a bunch of tech firms lay off a lot of employees in the past 2 weeks. And so there's kind of a lot going on. But the more integrated the search function is, talent acquisition is with talent management and the rest of the other functions of the company, the more successful and the higher job satisfaction their employees will have.
Mm-hmm. So were you surprised by any of your findings?
No, yes and no. I think what I'm most surprised about, nothing was a huge surprise, but what I think I'm most surprised about is the level of emphasis and how much issues around things like burnout and well-being persist in the workplace, and that employers really have to think more long term about these things. These are no longer just a result of the pandemic, but I think they're new ways of life for employees, the way they're going to think about their work-life integration and how they will view the employer in the future. And so I think there's a lot more for companies to consider today as they attract top talent to their companies beyond just compensation and benefits.
Hmm. And as things sort to settle and the great resignation seems to be slowing, can we say that things are becoming more stable? I mean, could the hiring roller coaster be slowing at all?
You know, I don't think so. I think the last couple weeks, so we just have seen the Google layoffs and
Hmm. Hmm.
the Microsoft layoffs, and so we've seen a few big tech companies, do layoffs, and then at the same time, you're hearing about skilling shortages. You're hearing about the need for other types of organizations, companies to upskill. We're also seeing a huge transformation in the types of skills that industries need. So, industries that were once completely non-digital are now have totally digital business models, and so as a result of this, I think we'll continue to see this kind of roller coaster of what are the skills and the upskilling that's required by certain companies, and how do they actually meet these vast changing needs over the next couple of years.
Mm. All right, Tessa, I've got to take a quick sponsorship break right now, but when we return, I want to talk more a little bit about your report and the 7 trends that will shape talent acquisition this year. Stay with us.
Labor relations is changing rapidly, and it can be frustrating if the tools you're using are not keeping pace. If you spend too much time searching for what you need, or you find it challenging to collaborate with your team, it's time to think about your employee communication resources in a different way. You need a labor relations platform that will help you connect with and educate employees. Proofbox solves these problems by offering a robust labor relations library of videos, e-learning, and ready-to-use websites at an affordable price. Whether educating employees or supervisors in preventive mode or in the middle of a union organizing campaign, Proofbox is like Netflix for labor relations. Learn more today at bit.ly/proofbox and make sure your tools are keeping up with the pace of labor relations today.
I'm back with Tessa Misiaszek, head of research for Korn Ferry Institute. So, Tessa, let's talk about these trends. Your report begins with a discussion, ditching the ladder for the lattice. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So, what's really interesting about this trend is the fact that if you think back to when perhaps if you've been in the workplace for say more than 10 or 15 years. I myself, I'm Gen X, right? So 25 years ago I graduated from college, and I went to join a big company in their sales division. And if I stayed with that company in their sales division, I would have stayed in the sales pipeline, so to speak, or the sales trajectory, going from a sales associate to a sales manager to a sales director to a vice president of sales and so forth. What we're seeing now is a lot more what we call internal mobility within organizations, within companies. So now with the use of workforce planning, more sophisticated predictive analytics, being able to really assess employees and understand what are their current skill sets, and also understand from them what do they want out of their career, and are there other areas they are interested in working in, or perhaps they even have the skills to work in. And what we're seeing is employees being able to really move horizontally, not just vertically, throughout a company. And so this really allows employees to think a little bit creatively about their career paths. What we're seeing more with internal mobility is also with younger generations. So, as I mentioned before, the statistic around Gen Z and millennials, comprising of upwards of 75% of the workforce by 2025, these younger workers, again, they want more cross functional experience. They want to be able to see the whole of the organization. They want to understand how their work every day impacts the purpose of why the organization or the company exists. And they want to see how that it impacts the customer, how it impacts society or the community at large. And so being able to have that line of sight to the purpose of the organization and being able to work across different functions of the company is really important to younger generations who are deciding where they want to work, at the types of companies they want to work for, and what kind of career opportunities will be available to them.
So, that second trend then focuses on retention through collaboration. Is that right?
Yes, it does. And it really focuses in on what I mentioned before, which is the search function or the talent acquisition function used to sit in one silo of a company, and then talent management used to sit in a different silo of a company. And what we're seeing today is that both the employees and the companies really need to think more holistically about the employees' development and really think about not just when they come into the company through the talent acquisition aspect of the company, not just how that package to attract them based on the compensation and the benefits will really impact that employee, but what is their career opportunity, what's their personalized learning path, what is their opportunities to be able to, again, as I mentioned before, work in different parts of the company, what kind of skilling is available to them, what kind of work environment will they work in. And so again, one survey actually found that 34% of employees had higher retention when they had more professional development opportunities afforded to them. So it's really about companies that develop their workers and they will retain more of their workforce diversity. And the company itself and the employee workforce will become more agile as a result and be able to be more efficient as a response to changing market conditions. So it's really about having this collaboration, as you said, between the talent acquisition function and the talent management function to be sure that you're looking at the entire life cycle of the employee and that you're offering them lots of different opportunities that allows them to stay loyal to that particular company.
So I noticed that interim workers take the stage in the third trend. How did that come about?
Yeah, so interim is a huge trend that is, I think, the result of a few pieces here. And as we think back to what I just mentioned around the multi-generational workplace, we have kind of mostly occupying the top of the organization are baby boomers, and then we have Gen Z who are coming into the entry level positions within a company. Gen Z right now is upwards of 26, 27 years old in the workplace. And so if you look at these two populations, what do they actually have in common is that they actually both make fantastic interim workers. So what is an interim worker? An interim worker is basically a short term hire. It's sometimes referred to as a gig worker or a contract worker. And what's interesting about short term work and the way that it can be leveraged by companies, of course, we've heard of temp workers. These are workers or professionals who come in and, temporarily take the place of fill in for a role, take the place of an employee who might have gone out on maternity leave or who perhaps just left the company and they're looking to kind of fill the role until someone gets hired. That's been the kind of traditional sense of the interim worker. But what we're seeing now is that more employees are actually preferring to have a career that is based on interim work. That means for baby boomers who might be in semi-retirement, they don't want to completely retire because they, don't want to spend every day on the golf course.
Mhm.
They kind of want to keep their toe in the water. These are fantastic people to consider with, many years of experience, upwards of 30, 35, 40 years of experience to be these interim professionals, executives that might come into a COO role or to a CFO role and really turn around the organization, especially if perhaps it was in chaos or something happened with the previous executive. And then you have Gen Z or younger generations who have come up through their formative years with the global pandemic. They are more apt to want to do more project based work. They're really skilled, highly skilled in things like technical skills or accounting or financial skills. And again, they want the opportunity to have this work life integration where they can travel and work remotely and do project based work. They're highly agile, highly intelligent, and they can really kind of come in with these technical skills and make a pretty big impact in a very short period of time. And so for companies to think about their total talent management strategy, there might be parts of the business that might require interim, whether it's, hey, we need to shift this executive function, or we want to change the way it works, or we want to change a reporting structure. So we want to bring in an interim executive to see how that works. That's a great reason, strategic reason why you might bring an interim. Or again, if you have to skill up in a particular area, if you have to respond to, say, new ESG regulatory requirements, and you need new skilling around, being able to deliver on the KPIs for that particular regulation, you might bring in interim with those technical skills to be able to do that very quickly. And so we're seeing, not just kind of a rise in the number of employees in the labor market who are really interested in this type of work, but we're seeing the real strategic opportunity that companies have to leverage these interim workers in order to really, promote their business growth or to pilot different types of business growth strategies.
So I was surprised by the recommended ratio of full-time employees to interim workers. Did that surprise you at all?
It's funny. It did. I think I've been in the research for quite some time that it doesn't. But that ratio is actually that you're referring to is 70 to 30 full time employees to interim worker mix. And again, for all the reasons I just mentioned, as it relates to all the strategic opportunities that companies can have to really pilot new business growth strategies, to try out new types of positions, to think about organizational structure, and to pilot new positions with new reporting lines, as well as the opportunity to skill up or to really, transform an organization. For all those reasons, I think we'll see that percentage need for interim to continue to grow.
All right. So next up is trend number 4. What is that?
Okay, so trend number 4 is productivity check, but now what about culture? And here's where we're talking about the fact that there continues to be debate, return to the office or fully remote. We're predicting that hybrid is going to become the workplace norm. And the part of this is that, 64% of respondents said going back to the office would negatively impact their mental health. And so when we think about 100% return to work, that really, has a negative impact, not just on the mental health of employees, but it also would negatively impact their ability to have that work-life integration, to be able to take care of the things they need to take care of at home while, having to perhaps sit in the car for an hour commute to the office and stay in the office for 8 hours a day and so forth. So what we're seeing more of a trend is this hybrid option, which again, when you give employees a sense of agency around, hey, we have this workspace available to you. We would love for teams to leverage it, to use it, to get together. We want to continue to build and collaborate together. And when you give a sense of agency for employees to get together and organize around this, you actually see that 88% of professionals would actually coordinate office days with their teammates to enhance collaboration. So it doesn't have to be this forced return to the office on these days or X number of days a week. But if you actually say, hey, it'd be great to have you pop into the office at least once a week, coordinate with your team, there's that sense of autonomy. There's a sense of freedom and the fact that they have agency over their own lives. Yet it's upon them to think about, okay, what works best for everyone so that we can leverage and utilize the time that we're in the office together. We can really maximize that time together. So that's what we're seeing is really developing this culture around the hybrid workplace and realizing that culture will continue to play a very big role in employee satisfaction. What we're seeing more and more is that the talent management function, employee engagement, and culture actually have a direct correlation to customer satisfaction and brand. And so when a company really thinks about their brand and what they want to appear to be to their customers, that they really have to operationalize those values within their culture and really take care of their employees the same way. And so this is one of the trends that we are seeing that is really most successful moving forward.
Now, I was struck by the comment in the report surrounding potential dips in productivity. Can you share that with me?
Sure. And again, that had to do with employees who are being asked to come back full time to the office. And what we saw in our survey results were that actually 79% of professionals said that they would actually work fewer hours if they were required to come back to the office versus when they work from home. And, I think anecdotally, I can actually speak to the fact that I definitely work a lot longer hours simply because I can get up early in the morning and check
Hmm.
my email and do some work and kind of, work a full day rather than worrying about I have to leave at a certain time to go pick up my son from school or something along those lines, or sit in a car. If I'm from the Boston area today, there was a big car accident in traffic. It took about 2 hours to get into the city today. So rather than that being completely unproductive time, it actually is, employees are much more productive either in a hybrid or remote work environment.
That makes sense. All right, Tessa, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and my guest today is Tessa Misiaszek, Head of Research for Korn Ferry Institute. I'm back. So, Tessa, let's continue with our trend review. I think we're at number 5.
Yes, yeah. So number 5 is we're migrating from work-life imbalance to work-life integration. So what that is the concept that work-life balance has always been this goal of, I think, for millions of professionals. I know as a woman who has kids, who's married, and who has had a professional career the entire time, I've always kind of tried to strike that work-life balance. And for some reason, I've never actually achieved it. And that's probably because, when we think about work-life balance, there's never a time when everything's balanced, right? We all have those experiences where we feel like we're giving more to our work than we're giving to our family, or we're spending more time with our family and our work is suffering and so forth. So again, what we found was that, when you look at the traditional work week, the 5-day work week, there's a lot of new research that looks at other types of non-traditional models, whether it's a 4-day work week, whether it's thinking about the fact that perhaps employees can think about non-traditional work hours. Like I mentioned, I wake up most mornings and between 4 and 6, I check my email and kind of get a good start on my day. And then I take a break to go work out and get my kids off to school. That's very non-traditional work hours. And so 76% of professionals said they would prefer their work weeks to shift to non-traditional hours, and another 88% surveyed said returning to the office would make home duties much more difficult to handle. So what we talk about with work-life integration is this opportunity for, again, employees to have their own sense of agency, that they know the work that they have to get done. And of course, we're talking right now about professionals who have the opportunity to have this type of flexibility. Certainly, if you work in the front lines of an organization, or if you work in a manufacturing plant, or maybe in retail, you don't have these types of opportunities. But for those of us who have the types of jobs where we can work remotely or in a hybrid format, to be able to have some non-traditional approaches to our work week, so that we can take the time to visit our kid at school and see his school play, and then also be able to perhaps put in some late hours on that work proposal that we have the autonomy and the agency to make those decisions for ourselves.
For sure, for sure. And we've talked about trend number 6 on Project HR before. This is the concept of boomerang employees, but your report put the focus on the recently retired, right?
Yes, exactly. And, I have a special place in my heart for this because I'm actually a boomerang to Korn Ferry. So I worked for Korn Ferry 10 years ago as a consultant, and then I left to move into actually to work as a startup, and then to move into academia as a business school professor for about 6 years, and just returned back to Korn Ferry as the new head of research in the institute about 7 months ago. And so what's interesting about boomerangs, first of all, it's a really untapped resource, because when you hire back a boomerang employee, and I know this was true in my own experience, you're hiring someone who already has the institutional knowledge, right? So they can actually hit the ground much more quickly, and they have the opportunity to kind of really assimilate very quickly into the organization. They likely have a network already established, and they understand the products, they understand the work streams, and so forth. And so what we found in one study is that 15% of professionals who quit their jobs actually return to former companies. So when you think about, as an organization who might be looking for certain types of talent, to definitely consider the fact that you might want to go to the list of your former employees, and hopefully you've kept pretty good relationships with them, to really consider that they might come back. And in the case of those, retired professionals, when you think about a contract or an interim role, as we spoke about before, these are people, again, that have incredible institutional knowledge. They have years and years of expertise. And when you need, that interim COO or that interim CMO, that's a great talent pool to consider. And I have had the opportunity, because I've done some work with our interim practice, to meet a lot of these retirees, so to speak, who left the workforce for a year or two and came back. And, first of all, they're just energized. They're excited to be back. But they also have so much knowledge and experience to share. And so it really is quite inspirational. And I do think it's a fantastic path for both companies to consider, as well as baby boomers and I guess older Gen X possibly, to consider as kind of the third chapter of their career.
Yeah, interesting. And last but definitely not least, trend number 7 brings it all together, again, taking that broader view of acquisition and retention.
Yes. So this is where workforce planning needs to get a lot smarter. And we're going to see this with more people analytics being integrated into talent management, with the emergence of technology like AI and other types of technology, like blockchain and so forth, that will enable machine learning, that will enable organizations to really be able to put together algorithms to understand and be more predictive of the talent they need, the skills that they need, but then to also be able to assess their current employee population, their talent pool, and to really be able to make sure that looking at the job descriptions and the work that these employees are being required to do versus the work environment versus kind of what's happening in society and so forth, the types of pressures that they have, and to be able to detect things like burnout before it happens. Because when you think about employee burnout, again, that statistic alone acquires for 40% of staff turnover. And the average cost of replacement for these workers is 120% to 200% of their original salary. And so, to help avoid burnout, to help avoid these reasons why employees might quickly turn over, you really want to have the right technology, people analytics, workforce planning in place to be sure that you're really staying on top of the way your employees are feeling, and being able to be sure that you're future proofing your company against any sort of kind of outside forces or market conditions. They may throw the company or the market into chaos, as we've seen over the past 3 years, and that you can be, as a company, really ready to respond and to really support your workforce that you have in place.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I'll tell you, the role of collaboration in this list, the emphasis on retention, the overall commitment to building long-term relationships with employees, I have to say this report left me feeling more hopeful about the future of work and work in general. Did it leave you with the same feeling?
Yes. As someone who's worked in corporate environments for the past, 26, 27 years, it's such a different day. It's a new day where the workplace cares about employees. They care about their well-being. They are thinking about creating authentic cultures within the organization, because that they know that reflects outside of the company. And in that authenticity, they're really thinking, I think, more carefully about articulating a purpose that is meaningful to their workers, and that they can provide that meaningfulness of work that's really values driven and will help create more employee loyalty. So I think it's a very exciting time.
So you work for the Korn Ferry Institute, which is Korn Ferry's research and analytics arm. Share a bit about what you do there.
Yeah, so the Korn Ferry Institute is actually the place within Korn Ferry International where we really focus on innovative research, what is happening, what's on the horizon in the next 5, 10, 15 years that the workplace companies need to be thinking about now. But we conduct what's called engaged scholarships. So we actually work really closely with the clients that we have to make sure that we are delivering and finding research and providing thought leadership that's going to be most impactful for them and help them prepare for, different market conditions and the way it's affecting the employee talent pool and so forth. We also do IP development as it relates to individual assessments, to benchmark research, to organizational assessments, and different types of development tools for companies kind of across individuals, teams, and organizations. And then we do have a very big focus on data analytics, people analytics, predictive analytics, so that, again, companies can be most prepared with looking at their assessment data, with their performance data, to really be able to predict the future of their talent pool and what kinds of skills they might need as well.
Well, and of course, you're a very busy woman. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention you are one of the hosts of the Happy at Work podcast. Tell me about your podcast.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So at the Happy at Work podcast, along with my co-hosts, Michael and Laura, we have over the past year just had conversations similar to this one with CEOs, HR leaders, and entrepreneurs that are really focused on developing a positive workplace environment and a positive culture in the workplace. So we've really had the opportunity to interview people around the 4-day work week, look at the cutting edge research around that, all the way to how to, think about a positive workplace interventions to really engage employees and how to promote a positive workplace culture. So it's been a fun endeavor, as I'm sure you know, doing a podcast. I think it's just usually one of the best highlights of my week are those conversations that are very enlightening.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. And get to talk to different people all the time and interesting perspectives. So if I'm curious, I don't want to find out more about you, about the report, about Korn Ferry Institute, or even about the Happy at Work podcast, where can I go?
Sure. You can first find me at the Korn Ferry Institute at kornferry.com, and you can look us up at the Korn Ferry Institute. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So, of course, happy to always connect with people through LinkedIn or the happyatworkpodcast.com.
And of course, all that information and those links will be included in this week's episode companion guide, which you can grab for free at iriconsultants.com/podcast. Right now, though, Tessa, it is time for our lightning round questions. These are questions I ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about talent acquisition trends for the year. In your opinion, which of these 2022 pop culture trends should stick around a little bit longer? Charcuterie boards or Wordle?
I'm going to say charcuterie boards.
Yeah, girl after my own heart. Let's eat. All right, next question. What is the best book you've read recently?
I'm going to be super crass. I wrote a book that was published in October of last year through Hachette Publishing called Branding That Means Business. And that, I think, is the best book I've read recently.
I like that. I might go pick that one up. Next question. What is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
Oh gosh, I've said this a few times, having been a business school professor, for the past 6 years at Holt International Business School and prior to that at Simmons University in Boston, I have been doing case studies, teaching case studies, and now every day my life is I get to work in an actual case study where I get to look at the trends, I get to look at some of the key business opportunities or issues that companies are facing and try to find solutions. So it's the best part of my job by far.
Very nice. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
It's simple. Just hustle. You gotta hustle. I think it's great to network. I think it's great in your career. I always tell young people to network, to think about your personal brand, to get out there. But at the end of the day, you have to hustle. Just take the job, try it. If it doesn't work out, go look for another job. Just keep going forward, keep hustling, and you'll land on your feet.
That is good advice. All right, last question. Who or what inspires you?
Oh gosh. So this is, again, I don't want to sound cheesy, but my boys, I have a 19-year-old at NYU who's an up-and-coming actor who is in the arts and super passionate, has wanted to be an actor his entire life. And he inspires me, as well as my 16-year-old who's super passionate about photography. I've raised 2 artists, and he's also a skateboarder and a surfer. And I've seen these 2 kids. I think Gen Z and overall is a pretty cool generation, but these kids are so passionate about what they do, and they really just go for it. And as parents, we try to nurture that, so they inspire me every day.
I love that. Thanks so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Tessa.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yes, and I also want to thank those listening in, and here's a final reminder to unlock your access to this episode's companion guide at iriconsultants.com/podcast. If you're ready for your Project HR debut, our team is always looking for outstanding guests. Let us know about your expertise by emailing us at projecthr@iriconsultants.com. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to Project HR. A new episode posts every other Thursday. Finally, drop me a line, leave us a review, or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this episode of Project HR. Let's make it a great day at work.